Have you ever noticed something strange? You can be in a good moment. People are smiling, the room feels warm, nothing is wrong, and somehow you still don't feel fully real inside it. You're there. You're talking. Maybe you're even laughing. But part of you feels slightly disconnected, like you're watching yourself act normal instead of naturally being in the moment. And what makes it even stranger is this. It doesn't usually happen in the worst moments. It often happens in the good ones. And if that happens to you, it may mean something deeper than you think. Because this is not always sadness. It's not always anxiety either. Sometimes it's something quieter. It's the feeling of being in a moment that should feel natural, but instead feels slightly unnatural from the inside. And most people never talk about that, because from the outside, it looks like nothing. But inside, it can make you question everything. Why can't I just enjoy this? Why do I suddenly become aware of myself? Why does happiness sometimes feel staged? Why do good moments make me feel fake? And the answer usually isn't what people assume. A lot of people think this means they're emotionally distant, ungrateful, cold, disconnected by personality. But the real reason is often much more psychological than that. Sometimes a moment feels fake, not because it is fake, but because it feels unfamiliar. That's where this starts getting interesting. Because for some people, bad feelings are familiar. Stress is familiar. Tension is familiar. Being alert is familiar. But peace, warmth, safety, simple joy, those can feel strangely unfamiliar. And when something emotional feels unfamiliar, the nervous system doesn't always relax into it. Sometimes it watches it first. That's why a person can be in a happy moment and still feel slightly outside it. Not because they don't want it, but because some part of them still doesn't fully trust it. And you can see this in very small behaviors. You're having a nice conversation, and suddenly you become hyper aware of your own face. Someone says something kind, and instead of fully receiving it, you feel awkward inside. You're laughing with people, but a second later, you notice yourself laughing, and the whole moment becomes self-conscious. You're included, you're wanted, you're safe. But your system still stays half observing. That's why good moments can feel so confusing, because nothing is visibly wrong. And yet something inside you doesn't completely settle. Now here's where most people misunderstand this pattern. They think the problem is confidence. But often it's not about confidence, it's about control. When someone has spent a lot of time adapting to emotional unpredictability, they often become inwardly controlled. Not always in an obvious way. Sometimes they look calm, thoughtful, quiet, easygoing. But inside they are constantly monitoring tone, monitoring reactions, monitoring shifts, monitoring themselves. That self-monitoring becomes so normal that they don't even notice how often they do it until they enter a good moment. Because good moments require something different. They require presence, and presence means loosening control. That sounds small, but psychologically it isn't. Because if your mind learned that staying alert protects you, then fully dropping into a moment can feel risky. Not dangerous in a dramatic way, just strangely unprotected. And that's why some people don't just struggle in painful moments, they also struggle in peaceful ones. Because peaceful moments ask the nervous system to do something unfamiliar. Stop preparing. And for people who learn to stay prepared, that can feel deeply unnatural. This is why joy can feel fake. Not because the joy is fake, but because your body is still arriving later than your mind. Your mind may know this is a good moment, but your body may still be asking, can I trust it? That split changes everything, because now you're not simply experiencing the moment. You're also observing it, checking it, measuring it, trying to see whether it feels real enough. And the more you notice yourself doing that, the more artificial the moment can feel. That's why the experience becomes so strange. You're not pretending, but you also don't feel fully inside what's happening. And that inner split can make people feel fake when they are actually being protective. That's an important difference. Because fake suggests dishonesty, but this usually has nothing to do with dishonesty. It has more to do with emotional hesitation. Part of you wants the moment. Another part of you is still scanning it. And when those two parts happen at the same time, the result is disconnection. Not total disconnection. Just enough to make the moment feel slightly unreal. And here's where it gets even deeper. A lot of people with this pattern didn't just learn to survive bad moments. They learned not to fully trust good ones. If warmth was inconsistent, you may have learned not to lean on it. If closeness disappeared suddenly, you may have learned not to relax too deeply into it. If happy moments were followed by criticism, tension, rejection, or emotional withdrawal, your system may have started linking good feelings with instability. So later in life, the problem is not that you don't want peace, it's that some part of you expects peace to change. That expectation is quiet, but powerful. It sits underneath the moment, and it creates a strange emotional distance between you and what you're experiencing. That's why this doesn't just show up in parties or obvious happy events. It can happen in very soft, ordinary moments too. A peaceful evening, a nice message, a warm conversation, a day where nothing bad happens, a moment where someone sees you gently, and suddenly, instead of fully relaxing, you become aware. You start noticing yourself from the outside, and that outside view becomes stronger than the actual experience. That's why some people say things like, I should be happy, but I feel weird. I know this is good, but I can't fully feel it. I'm in the moment, but not really. I look fine, but inside I feel disconnected. Those sentences sound small, but psychologically they reveal a lot, because they usually point to one thing. The person does not lack emotion. They lack felt safety inside good emotion. That's different, very different. It means the issue is not emptiness. It's difficulty settling. And once you understand that, a lot of confusing behaviors start making more sense. Why you can enjoy something and still feel detached. Why closeness can make you self-conscious. Why kindness can make you uncomfortable. Why even joy can sometimes wake up a strange distance inside you. Because the deeper pattern is not, I don't care. The deeper pattern is, part of me is still careful. That careful part may have helped you before. It may have protected you. It may have kept you emotionally prepared. It may have stopped you from collapsing in unstable environments. But later, that same protection can quietly follow you into good moments too. And when it does, you don't always notice it as fear. Sometimes you notice it as unreality, as awkwardness, as self-awareness, as emotional delay, as the feeling that something about your happiness isn't landing properly. But it was never random. It was a pattern where presence feels harder than people realize, a pattern where safety is visible on the outside, but not fully registered on the inside, a pattern where joy is not rejected, but gently held at a distance. And maybe that's the strangest part of all. Sometimes the people who look the most normal in good moments are doing the most internal work just to stay inside them. They are smiling, responding, participating, doing everything right, while another part of them is quietly checking whether the moment is real. That's exhausting, and it explains why some good moments leave people feeling unexpectedly tired. Not because they hated the moment, but because their mind and body were not in the same place while it was happening. One part was living it, another part was watching it, and when that happens enough, a person can start questioning their own identity. Maybe I'm cold. Maybe I'm broken. Maybe I can't connect. Maybe something is wrong with me. But often, something else is true. Maybe you adapted so well to emotional uncertainty that peace now feels unfamiliar. Maybe you got used to protecting your inner world so automatically that even beautiful moments pass through that filter. Maybe what feels like fakeness is actually a form of old protection. Not weakness, not emptiness, protection. And once you see that, something changes. Because now the feeling is no longer just random discomfort. Now it has a shape. Now it has a pattern. Now it tells a story about what your system learned to trust, a story about what it learned to question, a story about why good moments can feel harder to enter than most people would ever guess. And once you understand that, you start seeing this pattern everywhere. In the way some people pull back after closeness, in the way some people become awkward when they are loved, in the way some people feel lonely right in the middle of connection, in the way some people feel most unreal when life finally becomes calm. Because sometimes the hardest thing is not surviving pain. Sometimes the hardest thing is fully receiving peace. And if this explains something you felt before, then the next question may be even deeper. Why do some people feel uncomfortable, not when life is bad, but when life finally becomes calm?